There is a beauty in the wild places of the world, a profound, quiet allure that calls to something deep within us. It promises solitude, it promises peace, but that beauty is a mask, because when you are truly alone, miles from civilization, you begin to realize the wild is not empty, it is simply indifferent. And what happens when that indifference swallows a person whole? Welcome, dwellers of the dark, to NocturnalNightmares. Tonight we delve into the haunting, true accounts of those who ventured into the backcountry and were never seen again, leaving behind only whispers, unanswered questions, and a silence that screams. These are the stories of the vanished. My best friend, Liam, vanished from a world that had color and sound, and stepped into one that had neither. It happened on a Tuesday in late July, on the Jasper Creek Trail, a path we had hiked 100 times before. We weren't amateurs, we were seasoned hikers, the kind who carried topographical maps even on familiar trails, and knew the difference between a widowmaker and a safe place to rest. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and the air was alive with the drone of cicadas and the chatter of unseen birds. It was a perfect day. There was no reason for what happened. We were about 4 miles in, nearing a ridge that offered a panoramic view of the valley, when I first noticed it. A sudden, profound quiet. It wasn't a gradual fading of sound. It was as if someone had thrown a switch. One moment, the forest was a symphony of life. The next, there was absolute, oppressive silence. No birds, no insects, not even the rustle of wind in the canopy above. I stopped, and the only sound I could hear was the frantic thumping of my own heart and the harsh rasp of my breath. "Liam, do you hear that?" I asked, my voice sounding thin and small in the vacuum. He had stopped a few yards ahead of me, his head cocked. "Hear what?" "I don't hear anything." "Exactly," I said. The silence was a physical presence, a heavy blanket smothering the world. It made the air feel thick, hard to breathe. Liam, ever the pragmatist, shrugged it off. We must be in a dead zone, a weird pocket of acoustics, but it felt wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. We kept walking, and the silence persisted. It was unnerving, walking through a vibrant, living forest that was as quiet as a tomb. Then Liam pointed to something just off the trail, about 20 feet into the dense undergrowth. A tree, a single, ancient pine that looked wrong. It was hard to describe. It looked like a badly rendered image in a video game, its edges blurry, its colors muted and washed out, as if it existed on a different plane of reality. "What the hell is that?" he murmured, more to himself than to me. Against every instinct screaming in my gut, he stepped off the trail and started walking towards it. "Liam, don't," I said, my voice tight with a fear I couldn't name. "Let's just get to the ridge." He didn't listen. He was captivated. As he drew closer to the strange tree, something began to happen to him. His bright red backpack started to lose its color, fading to a dull, washed-out pink, then to a soft gray. The vibrant green of his jacket followed suit, melting into a monochromatic shade. It was like watching a color photograph being slowly dipped into bleach. "Liam, get back here." I screamed, my voice cracking with terror. He turned to look at me, and my heart stopped. His face was losing its color too, his sun-kissed skin turning ashen, his blue eyes becoming the color of slate. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He looked confused, then terrified. He took a stumbling step back towards the trail, towards me. But as he moved, he seemed to fade, his form becoming translucent, like smoke. I could see the trees behind him through his body. He reached a hand out to me, his expression one of pure, silent agony. And then he crossed some invisible threshold. He didn't vanish in a puff of smoke. He just wasn't there anymore. He had stepped fully into that zone of silence and gray, and it had consumed him. I stood there, paralyzed, staring at the empty space where my friend had just been. The strange, muted tree was still there. The oppressive silence was still there. I turned and ran. I ran until the sounds of the forest rushed back in, the bird's song and the wind feeling like a physical assault after the profound quiet. I didn't stop until I reached the trailhead. The official search lasted for weeks. They found nothing. No footprints leading off the trail. No broken branches. No sign of a struggle. No Liam. I told them my story, my frantic, incoherent tale of a silent, grey world that swallowed my friend. They looked at me with pity. The official report citing probable disorientation leading to a fatal fall in an unexplored area, with a quiet, unofficial addendum about the psychological trauma I had clearly suffered. I never hiked the Jasper Creek Trail again. But 10 years later, driven by a ghost I could not exercise, I went back. I found the spot. The silence was still there, a perfect, soundless circle in the woods. The grey, washed-out tree still stood in the center. I stood at the edge where I had last seen Liam, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I stared into that silent, colorless world, and I saw something, a shape, a tall, thin, pale gray shape, standing motionless beside the tree. It had no features, no clothes, but I knew, with a certainty that froze my soul, that it was him, or what was left of him. He was standing there, patiently waiting. And I knew, as I turned and walked away for the last time, that he wasn't waiting for a rescuer. He was waiting for company. I'm what the Park Service calls a ridge runner, a seasonal caretaker for a remote section of the Appalachian Trail in northern Georgia. My job is mostly trail maintenance and checking on through hikers. It's a lonely job, but I like the quiet. 2 years ago, in late August, I found the camera. It was half buried in mud and leaf litter, just off the trail near a place called Blood Mountain, a spot infamous for its sudden, violent weather and a long history of hikers simply vanishing. The camera was a small, durable, waterproof model, the kind serious hikers use. Its battery was dead, but the memory card was intact. I took it back to my cabin, charged it, and what I found on that card has kept me awake for 730 nights and counting. The card belonged to a woman named Anna Vance. I learned this from the first few video files short. Cheerful clips of a young woman with a bright smile and freckles, documenting her solo hike. She was experienced, confident, and full of life. She talked about the beauty of the trail, the people she'd met, the joy of being alone in the wilderness. For the first 2 days of her video diary, everything was normal. Then, on day 3, the tone changed. The video, time-stamped just after dawn, was shaky. Anna was whispering, her face pale, her eyes wide with something more than just fatigue. "The strangest thing happened last night," she said, her voice trembling. "I woke up and all my food was gone. Not dragged away by a bear, just gone. My pack was still zipped, and everything was covered in this fine red dust. It's everywhere." She held up her hand to the camera, and her fingertips were stained a deep rust red. The next file was from later that day. The sun was high, but the forest around her looked dark, the colors oddly muted. "I think I'm lost," she said, her voice strained. "The trail markers are gone, all of them, and the compass, it's just spinning. It's like the mountain doesn't want me to leave." She panned the camera around, showing the endless, identical trees. There was no trail visible. That's when I heard it for the first time. Faintly, in the background of the recording, a low, resonant humming sound. It wasn't a man-made noise. It was a deep, guttural thrum that seemed to vibrate at a frequency that made my teeth ache, even through the tiny camera speaker. Anna didn't seem to notice it. The final video file was titled only with a string of corrupted numbers. It was recorded at night, the only light coming from her headlamp, which cast a weak, bouncing beam. She was running, crashing through dense undergrowth, gasping for breath, sobbing. The humming sound was louder now, much louder, a constant, oppressive presence. "It's not the sky," she screamed, her voice a raw shriek of terror. "The color, it's not the sky." She stumbled, and the camera fell from her grasp, landing on the forest floor, pointing upwards. For a few seconds, all I could see was a chaotic canopy of leaves, eerily illuminated from above. But the light wasn't moonlight. It was a shifting, sickly green and purple glow, like a corrupted aurora borealis, pulsing in time with a deep, resonant hum. Anna scrambled back into the frame, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at something just past it, her eyes wide with an unspeakable, mind-shattering horror. "What do you want?" she sobbed. "Please, what do you want from me?" The humming stopped. A profound silence fell, broken only by her ragged, terrified breaths. And then a new sound emerged from the darkness behind the camera. A voice. It was a perfect, chilling mimicry of Anna's own voice. The same cadence, the same slight tremor, but it was flat, hollow, and utterly devoid of emotion. "We just want to see," the voice said calmly. Anna stared, her face collapsing in on itself with dawning, absolute horror. "See what?" she whispered. The camera shook as the thing that wore her voice moved closer. The last thing the microphone recorded was the voice, no longer mimicking, but speaking in its true tone. a sound that was a chorus of 1,000 dry, whispering voices, all speaking in perfect, terrifying unison. How you come apart. The recording ended with a sharp, wet, cracking sound, and then static. I sat there in my cabin, the silence of my own remote patch of woods, suddenly feeling hostile, predatory. I turned the camera over to the authorities. They confirmed it belonged to Anna Vance, a hiker who had been reported missing 2 years prior. They searched the area where I found the camera, a place they had already searched 12 times before. They found nothing. No remains, no clothes, not even a trace of the strange red dust she had described. Sometimes, when I'm out on the trail, deep in the backcountry, where the silence is absolute, I think I can hear it. A low, deep hum, just on the edge of my hearing. And I know that the thing that spoke with Anna's voice is still out there. It's still watching, still curious, and still hungry to see how we all come apart. For 15 years, I was a volunteer for the county's search and rescue team, operating in the dense, unforgiving wilderness of the Cascade Mountains. I've seen it all. Hikers who fell, hunters who got lost, kids who wandered off. Most of the time, we find them. Sometimes, we don't. But there's a third category, one we never talk about with outsiders. We call it a red tape case. It's not an official term, just a grim piece of SAR slang. It means the search is over before it's even begun. My first red tape case was for a 9-year-old boy named Caleb. He vanished from a crowded campsite at midday. 1 minute he was chasing a butterfly near the edge of the woods. The next, he was gone. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. It was as if the forest had simply inhaled him. When our team arrived, the lead ranger, a grim, leathery man named Thompson, pulled our SAR lead aside. I saw him pass Thompson a folded piece of paper. Thompson read it. His face went pale, and he nodded. He came back to us and said, "All right, this one's a red tape protocol. Grid search, 50-yard perimeter. That's it. We find nothing. We pack it in at sundown." We were stunned. 50 yards for a missing child. That's not a search. It's a formality, we argued. But Thompson's face was stone. That's the order, was all he'd say. We searched the tiny perimeter, shoulder to shoulder. We found nothing. Not a footprint, not a scuff mark, not a single thread from his bright yellow shirt. At sundown, just as he'd said, Thompson called it. We packed up and left a devastated family behind, leaving their son to the wilderness. It felt wrong. It felt like a betrayal. Over the years, I saw the red tape protocol invoked 3 more times. A lone botanist who vanished from a well-marked trail. A pair of experienced climbers who disappeared from a sheer rock face, their ropes still anchored. Each time, the circumstances were the same. A sudden, inexplicable disappearance in a specific, localized area. And each time, the search was a perfunctory, suffocatingly small operation. I started digging, unofficially. I pulled the old case files, cross-referencing maps, looking for a pattern. I found one. All 4 disappearances, including Caleb's, had occurred within a 20-square-mile area known to the old logging companies as the Quiet Woods. And in each case file, tucked away in the witness statements, was a recurring, bizarre detail. Just before the person vanished, witnesses reported hearing a sound. They all described it differently. Flute, a high-pitched whine, a woman singing, but they all agreed on one thing. The sound was beautiful, mesmerizing, and seemed to be coming from deep within the trees. They called it the call. The last time I went out was for a college student named Jenna. She'd been day hiking with friends. They said she'd stopped claiming to hear the most beautiful music she'd ever heard, and had walked into the woods to find its source. She never came back. When we arrived, Thompson was already there. He initiated the red tape protocol, but this time I saw the piece of paper. It wasn't a report. It was a note, written in a shaky hand by one of Jenna's friends. It said only 2 words. She heard it. Something in me snapped. While the team performed their useless 50-yard sweep, I broke protocol. I walked to the edge of the woods where Jenna was last seen, and I just listened. For an hour there was nothing. Then I heard it. It was faint, a high, ethereal melody that seemed to weave itself through the trees. It was achingly beautiful, a sound that promised peace, joy, an end to all sorrow. It wasn't just a sound. It was a hook in my soul, pulling me, urging me to come closer, to find the source of such sublime beauty. I took a step into the woods, then another. The sound grew louder, more intoxicating. I felt a profound sense of calm wash over me. All my worries, all my fears, melting away. All that mattered was the music. I was 10, maybe 15 yards into the woods when my radio crackled to life. It was Thompson, his voice a harsh, static-laced bark. "Damn it, Carter, where are you? Get back to the line, now." His voice shattered the beautiful melody. The spell was broken. The sense of peace vanished, replaced by a sudden, chilling dread. The forest around me suddenly seemed darker, the trees too close together, their branches like grasping claws. I turned and scrambled back to the trail, my heart hammering. Thompson grabbed me by the arm, his eyes burning with a cold fire. "What the hell did you think you were doing?" he snarled. "The call," I gasped. "I heard it. We have to go in there. We have to find her." Thompson's face softened, but his expression grew even grimmer. He leaned in close, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "Son, you've got it all wrong. The red tape protocol isn't about the person who's gone. It's about us. We're not abandoning them. We're containing it." I stared at him, confused. Containing what? He looked me dead in the eye, and his words chilled me to the marrow of my bones. "We don't know, but we know 2 things. 1, whatever makes that sound, it only takes 1 at a time. 2, it doesn't like a crowd. The 50-yard perimeter, the tight formation. It's not a search pattern. It's a defense formation. It keeps the rest of us from hearing the call." I finally understood the horrifying truth. The protocol wasn't a search. It was a quarantine, a grim, desperate measure to stop the contagion from spreading, to keep the thing that lived in the quiet woods from luring the rescuers themselves, one by one, into its silent, waiting embrace. We weren't there to find the lost. We were just there to make sure we weren't next. When my 6-year-old daughter, Lily, told me she had a new friend, I wasn't concerned. We were spending the summer at my family's old, isolated cabin on Widow's Peak, and she was lonely. I assumed she'd conjured an imaginary playmate. "What's your friend's name?" I asked, smiling. "He doesn't have one," she said, her expression serious. "He's the tall, quiet man who lives in the trees." A shiver, cold and unwelcome, traced its way down my spine. 20 years earlier, on this very mountain, my Uncle Robert, a quiet man himself, had walked into those same trees and had never walked out. His disappearance had shattered our family. He was an artist, not a woodsman, and had gone for a short walk to sketch the ancient, gnarled pine trees that gave the peak its name. They found his sketchbook a week later, propped against a rock. The last page wasn't a drawing of a tree. It was a hurried, frantic sketch of a tall, impossibly thin figure with limbs like tangled branches, its form seeming to blend into the forest behind it. The official report called it death by misadventure. My grandmother called it the mountain's tax. Now, 2 decades later, my own daughter was talking about a tall, quiet man in the trees. I tried to push my unease away. It was a coincidence, a child's fantasy, tinged with the ghost stories she'd overheard from the locals. But Lily's descriptions grew more detailed, more specific. She said her friend was sad. She said he was stuck. She said he liked to stand perfectly still for hours, pretending to be a pine tree, but that he was bad at it because his branches are all wrong. The dread began to coil in my stomach like a cold snake. I started watching the woods. From the cabin's porch, I'd scan the tree line, my eyes searching for anything out of place. The forest on Widow's Peak was old, the pines twisted into strange, almost human-like shapes by the relentless wind. It was easy to see faces and figures in the gnarled bark and tangled branches. I told myself I was just letting my imagination run wild, fueled by Lily's stories and my own buried trauma. Then one afternoon, I saw it. I was watching Lily play near the edge of the woods when my gaze fell upon a particular pine tree, one I hadn't noticed before. It was about 50 yards in, taller and thinner than the others, its color a sickly, pale gray that stood out against the deep green of the forest. And as I watched, a single long branch slowly, deliberately, lowered itself and then raised back up a silent, beckoning wave. I snatched Lily and ran back inside the cabin, my heart threatening to beat its way out of my chest. That night, I dug out the old, dusty box of my uncle's belongings. I found the police report, and tucked inside, it was a photocopy of the final page of his sketchbook, the drawing of the tall, thin figure. And at the bottom, in my uncle's familiar scrawl, was a single, terrifying note. It pretends to be a tree, It wears the woods like a skin, but it whispers, and it wants to show me something. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't a ghost. It wasn't the spirit of my Uncle Robert. This was what had taken him, and now it was trying to take my daughter. We were leaving. First thing in the morning, we were packing the car and leaving this cursed mountain forever. I went to check on Lily. She was sleeping soundly in her small bed. As I stood over her, I noticed she was clutching something in her hand. I gently pried her fingers open. It was a small, intricately carved object, a miniature human figure made from a single piece of pine wood. It was beautifully, expertly carved, with a level of detail that would have taken a master craftsman weeks to achieve. It was a gift from her friend. I spent the rest of the night sitting in a chair by the cabin door, a heavy fireplace poker in my hands, my eyes locked on the tree line. Just before dawn, in the grey, hazy light, I saw movement. A single figure stepped out from behind the trees. It was tall and thin, and it moved with a slow, hesitant gait. It was my Uncle Robert. He looked exactly as he had 20 years ago, not a day older. Wearing the same flannel shirt and hiking boots he'd vanished in. He stopped at the edge of the yard and looked at the cabin, his face a mask of profound, heartbreaking sadness. My mind reeled. Was this his ghost? Had he been here all along, watching over us? He raised a hand, not in a wave, but with his palm open, a gesture of peace. And then he spoke, his voice a dry, rasping whisper that carried on the morning air. The same voice I now knew belonged to the thing in the woods. Don't take her, it whispered, wearing my uncle's face, my uncle's form. She listens so well. The illusion shattered. The thing standing before me wasn't my uncle. It was the monster, wearing his skin like a suit, using his memory as a lure. It hadn't just killed him, it had absorbed him, and it had spent 20 years learning, practicing, perfecting its disguise, waiting for someone else to come along. It wasn't pretending to be a tree anymore. It was pretending to be a man, and it had gotten so very, very good at it. It wanted Lily not to harm her, but to keep her, a playmate, a replacement for the artist who had stopped telling its stories 2 decades ago. I stood up, raising the poker, and screamed a wordless challenge into the dawn. A father's desperate promise that this time the mountain would not be paid its tax. The last time I saw another human being was 6 days ago. Or maybe it's been 6 weeks. It's hard to tell anymore, because the sun hasn't moved. It's been hanging in the exact same spot in the sky, a searing, indifferent white eye, for what feels like an eternity. I am lost, but I'm not just lost. I am being kept. It started as a simple, ambitious solo hike through the Trinity Alps, a rugged, beautiful stretch of wilderness in Northern California. I was prepared. I had a map, a compass, a GPS unit, and enough supplies for 10 days. On the 3rd day, I made a mistake. I took a small, unmarked side trail, hoping for a shortcut to a scenic lake. The trail was faint, but clear enough. After an hour, I realized it was leading me nowhere and decided to turn back. But the trail I had just taken was gone, not overgrown, not hard to find. It had simply vanished, as if the forest had healed itself behind me. My initial flicker of panic was quickly suppressed by training. I pulled out my compass. The needle spun lazily, then settled, quivering, on no fixed point. I turned on my GPS, searching for signal. The screen read, a message it has displayed ever since. I wasn't just off the trail. I was in a place that didn't want to be found. The first 24 hours were about survival. I made camp, conserved my food, and tried to use the unmoving sun to get a bearing. But the sun never moved by. It remained locked at what felt like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, casting the same long, unchanging shadows. The days and nights no longer had meaning. There was only the endless, oppressive daylight. The forest itself is wrong. The trees are too uniform, the spacing between them too perfect, like a managed orchard planted by a lunatic. There is no wildlife, no birds, no squirrels, no insects. The only sound is a low, intermittent hum that I can feel in the soles of my boots. A deep, organic vibration that seems to come from the earth itself. It feels like the slow, deep breathing of an immense, sleeping creature. The trail is the real monster, though. It's a single, clear path of packed earth that winds through this silent, artificial forest. It's the only way to travel. Step off the path, and the undergrowth is an impenetrable wall of thorny, grasping vines. But the trail is a liar. It's a predator. I've tried to follow it, hoping it leads somewhere, anywhere. But it always, inevitably, loops back on itself. I will walk for what feels like hours, only to find the remains of a campfire I built days ago. I marked a tree with a deep gash from my knife. I passed that same tree 7 times yesterday, each time approaching it from a different direction. The trail is rearranging itself, herding me, keeping me contained within its impossible looping geography. I am not alone here. I haven't seen anyone, but I have found things. A single child-sized sneaker, perfectly clean, sitting in the middle of the path. A modern, expensive-looking tent, collapsed and empty, its fabric oddly brittle to the touch. And yesterday, I found a pile of backpacks, maybe a dozen of them, from different eraser canvas pack from the 70s, a nylon one from the 90s, a modern ultralight one. They were all empty, neatly stacked in a small clearing, like a collection, like trophies. The hunger is the worst part. My food ran out long ago, but I'm not starving. I don't feel hunger, or thirst, or even fatigue. The air itself seems to sustain me, a thin, tasteless nourishment that keeps my body functioning, but leaves my soul hollow and empty. This place doesn't want me to die. It just wants me to walk. Last night tore what passes for night in my thoughts. I gave up. I sat down in the middle of the trail, defeated, and I wept. As I sat there, the humming from the earth grew stronger, more rhythmic. The ground beneath me began to feel soft, pliable, I looked down. The packed earth of the trail was moving, pulsing, rising and falling in a slow, deep, respiratory rhythm. The trail was breathing. It was alive. And I was a microbe, a parasite, crawling along the skin of some vast, unknowable, terrestrial organism. A thought bloomed in my mind then, a thought that was not my own, a piece of knowledge delivered by the humming, breathing earth. This place, this being, is a collector. It draws in the lost, the curious, the unlucky. It feeds them its air. It herds them down its looping, shifting paths, and it keeps them. It keeps them for their thoughts, for their memories, for their stories. It finds the act of a conscious mind navigating its prison to be a form of entertainment, a kind of living art. So that is what I am doing now. I am walking. The sun is not moving. The trail is breathing beneath my feet. I am telling you my story, whispering it to the silent, watching trees, adding my voice to the collection. I don't know if this is a memory, a final, desperate message being broadcast from a place beyond maps, or if I am saying these words right now, in this endless, sun-drenched moment. It doesn't matter. The trail doesn't care. It just wants me to keep walking. And somewhere just around the next impossible bend, I know I will find an empty spot on the ground, a spot that is waiting patiently for my own backpack.